Okay, great. We're very pleased to have with us Kanni Wignaraja, who is the UNDP Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific. And on the screen behind us, you can see Stephen Rodriques, UNDP's Resident Representative in Afghanistan, who is joining us virtually from Kabul. And they have a report to talk to you about, which is the Afghanistan Socio-Economic Review by UNDP, which is called Fragile Gains, Deepening Subsistence Insecurity. Ms. Wignaraja, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
We have an outside bureau in here. There's a switching thing that creates an echo effect. It'll subside. You can speak into your thing.
Maybe I should try this more often.
Yes.
All right. Let me go right into why the story of Afghanistan is different in this deep dig that we did. So, and you'll see that it's a story of what I would call divergence, which is unusual in many economic analyses. So it's the first time since 2019 that we actually see a positive GDP growth rate. And it's at 2.7%. And this is because there are stronger revenues coming in from cross-border trade, tax collection, mining sector, etc. Now, usually, if you see a positive upswing in GDP, which had been negative growth rates for the last 5 years, you would think that that actually translates to improved living standards at the household level. But our UNDP report actually looks at the household economy. It looks at what does a household look like in Afghanistan today. And you see this diverging and, in fact, showing a decrease in basic indicators, looking at the subsistence insecurity data that we have compiled. So you can ask, is that unusual? Yes. In most countries, when you see an upswing on the macroeconomic side, even though the trickle down might be thin, you still usually see a rise, even a minimal rise, in the household economy. Now, this is fixable, and the good news is there is more revenue that can go actually to ordinary Afghan men and women and children. And this is, let me give you 3-4 data points that really kind of bring this picture home. First, the data shows that about 75% of Afghans are now what we would call subsistence insecure, and that's up since 2023. It means they're basically living on a shoestring. And about 90% of them were hit with a major economic or natural disaster shock and are unable to cope with such a shock. That's significantly up from 2023, where it was at about 65%. Now, the two immediate basic needs issues that are very stark is we see a drop in the quality of housing and in the quality of health and health care. These are two areas, together with water and I would say basic power supply, that usually in a general economic state are improved with the macroeconomy improving. Then the big hit is a further hit on women. So in this household survey that was nationwide, it shows now that only about 7% of Afghan women say they are part of the formal labor force, i.e. they work outside of the home in formal work. The rest, the big chunk now, women say that they earn their income from casual labor. And, this is, you can see the disappearance of women from the formal labor force is pretty near complete in this. And finally, the report points to some curious regional disparities. So if you look at the northeast region, and that's close to the Tajikistan border, and the southern region that's close to the Pakistan border, these, I would say, are the furthest behind when it comes to the household economy. Although the biggest drop is in the Central Highlands. And that's probably because also of the harsh climatic conditions and, you know, the natural disasters that hit Afghanistan last year. So to wrap my comments, I would say a few things. One, the math is very clear. This country, by not allowing 50% of its workforce, i.e. women, to actually contribute fully to the economy, probably loses approximately close to $1 billion in 2023 and 2024. That's about 6 percentage points of GDP. For UNDP, working very closely with women in business, our intent is to see how we can grow micro businesses. We work with about 80,000 micro business women owners of micro businesses, trying to move them up that ladder to small and medium scale, because that will really have a huge impact on this household economy, because they will double, triple the number of people they employ and everything they produce. I think also we've got to keep a very close eye on particular microclimates in Afghanistan, particularly, as you know, across some of the borders, the Iran border, Pakistan border, numbers of refugees who are returning. So big displacement rates will be found across those borders, further exacerbating this situation. But I'd like to close with one thought, and that is that we're learning hard from Afghanistan that not investing from the get-go directly with communities and instead delaying development for households has had a huge cost. So I hope 4 years later, after the Taliban takeover, that one thing we can do as an international community is really reinvigorate and invest in household economies for Afghan men, women, and children. Thank you, Farhan.
Thank you very much. I'd like now to turn to our guest speaking from Kabul, the UNDP Resident Representative in Afghanistan, Stephen Rodriques. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me pick up from where my regional director, Kanni, left off, which is to echo that caution against what we think is an illusion of economic stability in Afghanistan. Because while the economy shows signs of bottoming out after that prolonged period of decline, which Kanni made reference to, we now have a mixture of chronic structural problems combined with new emerging challenges. And what the data in this new report is telling us is that we should see this as a bellwether of very difficult times that lie ahead for the people of Afghanistan. Already, we're seeing a ballooning trade deficit, and the data is in the report. We're seeing a paralyzed international payment system, which is further crippling trade and commerce in the country. International banks will not do business with local banks and so on. The World Bank and others are projecting stagnant economic growth. And over the last 3 months, the government has struggled to pay salaries for public sector workers. And it's very visible on the streets of Kabul and in major cities, more and more hungry and unemployed people on a daily basis. Our data is also showing that household income and consumption declined significantly in 2024. And as Kanni made reference to, the more stable forms of income, like formal employment, declined for all groups across the society and has been replaced by reliance on informal income sources, casual labor, remittances, humanitarian aid. Now, all of this is happening in a context where humanitarian assistance was severely cut by half in 2024 when you compare to 2023. It was about 3.2 billion in 2023, dropped to 1.6 in 2024. In 2024, we also had over 800,000 Afghans forcefully returned from Pakistan. And this year, our projection is that between 600,000 and 1.5 million more will return. And when you go to the borders, you see these families, men, women with their children on the top of trucks with everything that they own, coming back to a country they haven't lived in for decades and trying to rebuild their lives with very little support. And on top of this, we should remember that Afghanistan is the number 6 country in the world in terms of countries impacted by climate change. So every year, we go to the different provinces and districts and villages to see the thousands of households where people have lost everything, their homes, their livelihoods, their crops, destroyed by flash floods, destroyed by droughts. And we still have the close to 600,000 former poppy farmers and workers who still have no alternative livelihoods 3 years after the poppy ban was introduced. And as Kanni made reference, then we have the millions of women who are increasingly unable to move freely outside their homes, to run businesses and to earn a living to support themselves and their families. So the message in this report is that we're not just dealing with the sudden onset crisis that occurred after the fall of government in 2021. We now have a protracted compound crisis on our hands. And frankly, we're actually losing grounds, and we're seeing a reversal even in some of the gains that were made. Now, of course, we in the UN with our partners, we're acting on many of the elements of these crises. In UNDP, for example, we have provided critically needed small-scale community infrastructure that has benefited more than 5.9 million Afghans so that they have access to water, to irrigation, to basic health services. Kanni made reference to the fact that we've supported close to 100,000 micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, roughly 80,000 of them run by women. We provided them with financing, with business training, with marketing support, etc., so that they can grow and create more jobs, particularly for other women. And we're helping to address the very critical energy deficit in the country. We're providing off-grid energy for social services, for hospitals, for health centers, for schools, but also for small businesses as well. And we continue to provide support to the extent that we can to thousands of the former poppy cultivators so that they can have an alternative source of income. But again, the message here is that we're not able to operate at the scale which is needed to address the magnitude of the challenges that we see. And now with the global funding cuts beginning to take a severe toll, we're seeing a reversal of the gains made. For example, just in the last 3-4 weeks, we've seen over 400 health facilities that normally provide critical and life-saving services closed, and more are slated to close in the weeks to come. So just before I conclude, I think the point the report makes is that we have to hasten the transition from relying on the dwindling humanitarian assistance and shift to the kinds of investments that can kickstart economic recovery, create meaningful jobs, and provide people with access to basic but sustainable social services. We have to make a pivot towards investments in basic water, energy, community infrastructure, banking and microfinance services that get capital into the hands of businesses, especially women-run businesses, insurance products, credit guarantee schemes that reduce the risk of lending. And of course, we must continue to lobby the de facto authorities to reverse the very restrictive policies imposed on women and girls, and to make the kinds of policy and regulatory reforms that are necessary to catalyze private sector growth and job creation. Thank you. Over back to you, and we welcome any questions you may have.
I'll now open the floor to questions. Are there any in the room first? Yes, please.
Georgia Garangiotti, Athens News Agency and Cyprus News Agency. Have you seen progress or cooperation from neighboring countries or other UN member states in addressing the Afghan refugee situation, women's rights and cross-border security issues? Thank you.
Okay. Stephen, would you like to take that first, please?
No, most definitely. We're seeing a lot of support from the international community, from not just the Western European donors, but also the regional member states, the Tajikistans, Kyrgyzstans, plus the other from China, from Pakistan, and others. So the humanitarian assistance that has been provided has been fairly significant. In terms of the human rights related issues and the issues related to women and girls' rights, the Gulf countries, the Qatars, the Saudi Arabias, etc., have played a key role in lobbying the de facto authorities to reverse those restrictive policies as well. So we're seeing different coalitions of member states being engaged on the range of issues. So it's not just the UN or the international NGOs that are active, it's a wide range of different stakeholders that are active on both the humanitarian front and the basic needs assistance to the country, but also in terms of the advocacy on human rights, on women's rights and girls' rights as well.
I believe I have a question. We have a question online from Iftikhar Ali.
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you for the briefing. I'd like to know whether the Taliban are also taking some steps to meet this dire situation. And secondly, has there been any progress for our Taliban to get the Afghan money, which is frozen in American banks?
You know, let me take the second part of the question first, which was at the center of the early discussions when they first came in. It is not off the table, but we don't see it as the central issue in the conversations, including in the Doha round. So I would say, while it's not off the table, right now, I think issues on lifting sanctions, opening up trade, a number of bilateral cooperation agreements have been more front and center or in the interest. In terms of the first part of the question, this is where I think more and more, while the revenues still coming in are very slim, and as Stephen reminded us, the trade deficit is ballooning. So it's not as though, although we're seeing this slight uptick on GDP, it certainly isn't sufficient to really relieve the state of the household economy in this country. So this is why the dire need still for assistance to come in. I would say really the pivot has to be in the type of assistance. While there's still a clear need for humanitarian aid to come in to support those who are at the edge of survival, the critical need is that the business sector, the private sector, and the markets in Afghanistan that actually deal with the everyday lives of citizens there have to really see a jump start. So the banking sector, investments in local businesses, credit lines, particularly for women-run businesses, and investment in small infrastructure, in solar, in small irrigation for farms, house and shelter. This is going to be key to lift the bottom up in the household economy.
Thank you. I believe there's a question online from Evelyn Leopold.
Can you hear me? Can you hear anything I'm saying?
Please.
Okay, I'll write out the question. I'll send the question to Farhan.
We can hear you. You can also ask it. You can also ask it. We're hearing your audio.
Can hear me. Okay. Do the leaders understand that they would have somewhat less difficulties if they took the restrictions off women? It doesn't solve all their problems, but it would help. And secondly, is part of the financing shortage due to the United States? Thank you.
Stephen, we'll defer to you first.
Maybe let me answer on the U.S. Funding. The U.S. administration overall, not just USAID, across the different departments, remained one of the most significant funders for humanitarian and basic needs assistance in Afghanistan. This is not just before 2021, it's also after 2021. So yes, the cuts from the U.S. will have a significant impact on the state of people's lives in Afghanistan, that's for sure. Stephen, maybe if you take the first part of the question.
So maybe I'll take a stab also at the earlier question, which is to point out that the de facto authorities have taken quite a number of positive steps, including controlling corruption, kind of made reference to improving revenue collection from taxes, from customs duties, etc. They have reduced taxes on small businesses. They have put in place currency control measures that have led to inflation being brought under control and to exchange rate stability. And of course, they have controlled the production of poppy in the country. But one of the major issues with respect to the fiscal policies of the de facto authorities is that roughly 50% of the state budget is allocated to security and defense. It's not going into creating the enabling infrastructure for businesses. It's not going into human capital, into health and education for people. It's not going into the policy and regulatory reforms needed for international investors to have confidence in the country. So there are many different drawbacks from having more than 50% of the state budget allocated to defense and to enforcing these very restrictive morality laws that they have imposed. Now, coming to the issue of whether they're aware, we should recall that, like in any other administration, it's not homogeneous. You do have moderate factions particularly the ministers and some of the agencies in Kabul, where you can engage with senior officials of the government, and they do understand that these restrictive policies are holding back not just women and girls, but the country. But then you also have the very conservative faction, largely in the south, in Kandahar and elsewhere, where the priority is on enforcing a certain interpretation of Islamic philosophy or teaching. And so it's difficult to say whether they recognize it or not, because there are very different opinions and different views in the de facto authorities. And it plays out in terms of our engagement across the country. And there are some regions where we have much wider degrees of latitude in terms of what we're able to do, and the fact that women can work and go to the field, go to offices in different parts of the country, and other parts of the country where it's simply not possible for that to happen.
All right. Are there any further questions? I don't see anyone else online. Anyone here? If not, I would like once more to thank our guests, Kanni Wignaraja and Stephen Rodriques. Thanks very much, and good luck on your work ahead, and thanks for this briefing. Thanks. Have a good afternoon, everyone.